Okay everyone, welcome back to another video on the channel. Today we're back on GT Sport and we're back with the FIA Manufacturers Round number 6, driving at the Redbull Ring. You see myself starting from P2 in the EU lobby, Garassa starting from P1 again. You might have seen the Nations race, he started P1 in that race also. In this race he started P1 also, and I just didn't really hook the qualifying up in this. I really should have had P1. I should have been into the late 28s on both the American account and my EU account. I didn't really get that qualifying sorted. You might have watched the live stream of the Americas final, which the Americans FIA race, which we're going to go through after this race is finished. This is going to be a very brief run of the European lobby races. It wasn't quite as exciting as the Americans lobby, so I'm going to do this in one video today, both done together. As you can see, we're going through the grid. Quite a big drop in times after, I think it was like P7 or 8, it went down quite drastically. You can see to over 30s already. I've seen other lobbies that other people are in, and I think 29.8 would have still been like P12 or 13, so the points were not amazing for this lobby, but I think the 29.4 was still an okay lap. It was my first run. It was basically my base lap. Should have really got it into a 29.0 at least, but like I say, it was still P2 and starting from an okay position. The only problem I knew straight away was Garassa was in the Ford Mustang, so I knew straight away that this was going to be quite a difficult car to pass, because we all know that the Ford Mustang on GT Sport is one of the fastest cars down the straight, so you always know that that's going to cause you massive issues in terms of trying to get past when you're in the Porsche. And I knew straight away that I'd have to try and make a move pretty much on the first lap, because that's when you know people haven't settled into a routine, so you really want to go for it on the first lap. That's what I found. It's very much like if you watch F1 in real life. You know, the opening lap is when they try and get their moves done, because that's when the cars, people are not settled in, and it's more likely to get passed on. As we're going to go through to the replay camera for the start of this race as we head off into turn 1. As you can see, all 20 cars getting through. Are they going to get through turn 1 nice and clean? As we look back, it looks fairly okay so far. Obviously with this rolling start, you see Grasser runs a little bit wide there. I run a little bit wide also. Get that slipstream, and I actually got a really nice pull and slipstream off of Garassa there, and was quite surprised that the Porsche was actually gaining down the straight. We had to go to the right hand side to look. There he goes defensive, so I go to the left hand side, try and brake late, but Garassa outbrakes himself, obviously concentrating on where I was, and actually outbraked himself. So this time this has worked. Obviously in the Nations race I was stuck behind Garassa through the whole race. It was a brilliant race, but this race I actually got past, and Garassa's now down in P3 and I'm into the lead in this race, and in pretty much the perfect position to drive this race on the medium tyres and just try and keep it nice and smooth. You can see going through turn 3, it looks like you can see on the top right hand corner that Garassa had an issue there. Looks like he got a slight bit of contact with another car, and he's actually dropped all the way down the grid. I think he's out the top 10, so this is looking like a very good opportunity for a fairly comfortable win if I can just keep it nice and smooth. One thing that I wanted to do was try and look after the tyres, because I did do the test runs, and it was showing in the FIA practice lobbies we did that looking after the tyres did help out when you get to like lap 5 and 6. So going to try and keep it smooth. You can see now we're not going to run through every lap in this race, because you can see already we're nearly 1.6 1.7 seconds ahead of P2, and we've got no one to really race with. So instead of just watching myself driving around all by myself, we're just going to skip through this race, jump to like the pit stop phase and different phases in the race, etc. when obviously just to show you the gaps that we were building up and the lap times that we were hitting. You can see onto lap 2 now, and already you can see we're getting close to the 2-second mark for the lead. So it was already looking like a fairly comfortable race at this stage. I just needed to make sure I hooked this lap up. Obviously the first lap out from the opening lap, you need to try and put a base lap down. Low 1 minute 30, late 29 would have been ideal. Not really pushing too hard though. You'll see I'm trying to make sure I wasn't using the full left hand side there to enter into this corner. I wasn't really pushing too close to the curb on the left hand side there. I was just trying to keep it nice and settled, because I didn't want to take any risks. You can see the gap was increasing. It looked like some people were driving on the hard tyres. I decided to go on the medium tyres. I felt like that when they were worn they were still reasonably fast and I could cope with it. So I was driving the medium tyres and just trying to keep it consistent, to be fair, at this point. Not really pushing the car, and still gaining 2.5 seconds in the lead now. So it's clear, you can see now that pretty much pulling away without much real effort in this race, and this was pretty much perfect for me. They're not always the most entertaining races, but when it's going it's quite nice and relaxing actually when you're in the lead, and you can see that you're pulling away fairly comfortably without too much effort as we go over the line. Base lap of 1:30.295, not a particularly amazing lap, but it was just there just to try and settle us in and get into a routine on this track and try not to make mistakes. As in the past at this track, I've had pretty much a disaster with this track as we jump through to the end of the start of lap 6 now, at the end of lap 5, the final lap before we go in the pits, and you can see we've managed to build that lead up to 5 seconds lead. If you have a little look at lap 5, we actually lost about 2 seconds on that lap in. Lap 4 was a 1:30.7, and then we went to a 33.4. It was nearly probably about 2.5 second loss, because I actually got a penalty, and I had to get rid of it after this right hand corner up here now, and it lost me probably about two and a bit seconds maybe. So a little bit of a loss of time on that one lap. I made a very silly mistake. I think it was on the exit of, I went too wide on the entry into turn 1, going on the left hand side where you cut over the white line. I went too far over, and then that sometimes gives you a penalty, and I did that, and my own fault, but wasn't really anything to worry about because we were still 5 seconds in the lead even after that penalty, and then obviously reducing your speed. I do like the way it's done now on this new system, because even though I suffered a bit from it, it kind of makes you you have to drive it cleaner. You've got to be quite respectful for the track limits. You've got to be careful you don't pick up any sort of penalty going through any of the corners. You know, if there's a corner that you know might give a penalty out, you know, do you risk pushing on that corner, or do you take it easy? It's quite interesting the way it works out. As we're coming in now to the pit stop phase on lap 6, the end of lap 6, sorry, going in the pits, trying to keep it nice and smooth. You can see they're pushing a little bit on the exit, but not really worrying the barrier there, just trying to keep it nice and smooth into the pits. And now we're going to see, as we go into pits, we're actually 5 seconds clear of P2, so quite a big lead over P2 at this phase of the race. So now it's just a case of putting them fresh tyres on and just trying to keep it smooth now to the finishing line and try and pick up a nice, fairly comfortable win in this race. You can see coming out the pits, I did the shifter. If anyone doesn't know about this, because the Porsche here, you see it was really slower. It kind of wanted to keep you in second gear coming out. So what I did, I put the shifter into the USB slot and kept the shifter in first gear. Now what that does is it activates first gear as soon as you come out of the auto drive situation. So it gave me the best possible acceleration going up the hill. But however, what you'll see is that P2, obviously in a different car with better gearing, actually gained about half a second on us just from the pit exit, even though we were doing that because obviously their car was probably geared better when they came out the pits. It's something that I know happens with the Porsche from the previous time. But now I've got this shifter sorted, and I'm going to start using it, because when I do the practice races, you can sometimes realise what gear you're going to start in. So it's a good thing to do if you have got a shifter and you find you're in the wrong, you know, if you're ever in the rev limit at the stage of when the countdown's going down, and you know you need to do an instant change into, say, second gear. If you've got a shifter, put it into second gear before the race starts, and then just keep your foot on the accelerator, and it will instantly go into that second gear, and it can save you quite a bit of time. It might not be a massive amount, but it's a few tenths. As we're now going to jump onto the end of lap 11, as you can see there. Now we've managed to build this lap up, the gap up to around 8 seconds at this phase. You can see 7-8 seconds, so a fairly comfortable second stint, just pulling away a few tenths every lap. I wasn't really worrying any of the exits, the corners, or trying, I was keeping it really safe, because the one thing I didn't want to do was pick up a random penalty of 5 seconds. We've seen, I've actually had bigger penalties live on stream for a very tiny cut. I think it was nearly 27 seconds we got. I think it was 27 seconds we got for one tiny cut. So there is issues with the game, so I didn't want to risk any sort of penalty that would take this result away going into the final lap. As you can see, keeping it nice and smooth and just trying to bring it home now for a nice solid points haul. You can see B Gators in P2. I don't know where Grasser clearly had the speed. His fastest lap was about a tenth faster than mine. I didn't quite hook up my first lap out of the pits. You can see on the right hand side that lap 8, sorry, was a 20. I think it was a 29.8 or a 9, and then I hit a better lap on my next lap, and the tyres were a bit more worn. So the pace was there. It was just about trying to keep it consistent, really. I didn't want to be pushing the limits. Grass obviously trying to come back through the field, needs to be pushing. I didn't really need to push, but I think it's a shame that he obviously made that mistake into turn 1. It was good for me that I got into the lead, but it was a shame for the race because I think it could have been a really interesting race because the Porsche would have been so much faster and better on the tyres, like especially through the corners and stuff. As we see a car there clearly waiting for myself to go over the line so we can get lapped and then go over the line because he didn't want to complete another lap. But yeah, I think it would have been a really interesting race with the Ford Mustang, because that car would have been hard to pass on the straights but weak through the corners. So it's a shame that happened, but good for me. I pick up a nice solid win. You can see I lost about 3 seconds, so without that 3 seconds that we lost with the penalty, it would have been an okay finishing time of around 18:24, something like that, as we pick up 2,400 points for that race. So now what we're going to do, we're going to go on to probably one of the most intense races I've pretty much ever, one of mine probably since I've been playing the game on GT Sport. This was an absolute amazing race. I think you're going to enjoy it, and we're going to start this. We're going to watch this race all from the replay cameras, because if you want to watch this race from the live footage, obviously the gameplay footage as and when it happened, I'm going to put the link in the description from the stream, so you can just fast forward to the section obviously when this race was on, and you're going to witness a very intense race. I think you'll see the chat coming up about how intense it was. There was incidents on lap 1 and it was really enjoyable to watch. I think a lot of people enjoyed this race. We had over 400 people watching the live stream when we were doing this, and I think I put on a good show for everyone. It was really enjoyable. Slight error on my behalf on lap 1, as we can see, getting a massive slipstream off of P1. You can see I wanted to go aggressive straight away and try and make a move on this Porsche in P1. Now this Porsche in P1 is one of the FIA World finalists that was at the event in Monaco. As we're going side by side into turn 1, I try and hang it around the outside. We're going to jump on board with him now as he puts the power down, and he gives me a nice whack there where he was actually losing control of the rear. He got on the curb and started losing control of the rear. If I wasn't there, he would have spun, but his car completely whacked the side of mine. It frustrated me a bit, and I lost a bit of time. You can see then I tried to go in the slipstream and go down the inside of the Mustang, but I didn't see the Porsche. So this was 100% my fault. I totally didn't see the Porsche there, and I took a massive chunk of tyre wear out my tyres. I think it was quite bad. If you watch it in slow-mo, it really did wear them rear tyres out. So now we're in a very frustrating position. Yeah, we're down into P7, I think it is now at this phase, and we've got to get past some really fast cars in a straight line, and we've got tyres that are probably not as good as they should be at this phase of the race now, because with the times 15 tyre wear, any sort of incident like that, we've said it before in previous videos, it really does take a lot of tyre life out of your tyres. As we now come up to that Nissan in front of us, this was going to be a test. Can we get past the Nissan? I knew I'd be much faster, but look at P1, he's starting to pull away already, and this is going to be really difficult to try and challenge for the lead in this race. But at this phase, I still thought it would be possible. You can see not too far ahead, he's about 3-4 seconds up the road. So if I can just get past these cars as quick as possible, the race is still on. So now at this phase, I needed to calm down and try and get myself back focused in on this race after obviously my mistake, and obviously I think the turn 1 where P1 gave me that little nudge, I think it wasn't his fault. I think he actually lost control on the curb trying to put the power down too much. He hit my car and I lost momentum because that lost positions, and then I tried to tuck under the Mustang and did not see the Porsche, so that was 100% my fault. In the stream, I think I blamed the other driver, but it was just the moment when you drive and you tend to blame other people. But looking back, it's 100% my fault. But now we've got to try and concentrate on seeing if we can pass these drivers. You can see the Nissan and the Porsche battling, but the Porsche runs really wide into turn 3 there, totally misses his braking marker, and that's one position gain straight away. So this is going to make it a little bit easier. You can see the Porsche in the lead isn't really pulling away too much, as now the Nissan in front of me is starting to hold me up through the corners. He has a massive moment on the exit of that corner, nearly loses control of his car, and now I'm trying to just get solid exits from the corners to try and see if I can make a move in the only real overtaking opportunity. I know this corner is an opportunity, you can see, but the Porsche just hasn't got the legs to make a move on the inside there, so I decided to tuck back in that slipstream. There's no point throwing one up there and both of us losing time. I need to find a way to get past him that will be safer and without losing me too much time to P1. I was trying to think of the long run while I was doing this race. I was very silent while streaming this. You can probably feel the intensity when this was live, because I was really concentrating, trying to pick my moment to make a move as we go through turn 1, trying to hook it up and trying to take a really tight line so I could get a better exit from the corner. We actually give the GTR a little bump up the straight, which helped him out on acceleration again, because he got a little bit loose on the exit and we got a much better exit and actually clipped the rear of him as we went up the hill and boosted him up the hill, which ruined any chance of an overtake into turn 2. So now we're going to try and see if we can find another way to overtake. The other opportunity is into turn 3. You can see at this phase now, the driver in the Nissan actually put his indicator on to say right hand side. So he was saying for me to go past on the right hand side. I took that as an opportunity, went down the inside, he left the door open. This was basically, he scripted that, he wanted me to go past it. Whether he knew that I was faster or whether he just didn't want to affect his own race pace, which is quite sensible in a way, because defending from me was probably going to hold him up, and he's got that Porsche behind him that could come into play further on in the race. So maybe a tactical move by him, but it frees me, and now I'm able to chase after P2 in that Mustang. So this again is going to be a hard car to overtake, purely because of its straight line acceleration. However, I knew that through the corners I should be much stronger than that Mustang. So now I've got to chase this car down and see if we can get closer to that P1, who's starting to put, you can see the lead starting to build. He's got about a 4-second lead at this phase, and I've just got to try and concentrate and push as hard as I could at this phase and see if I can gain every bit of 10th out of the corners and catch up to P2 as soon as possible. I needed to catch him up and get past him without being held up too much, as we can see going through turn 1, not trying to run too far wide there. It worked out that when you run, you might have seen on the first race, when you run really far wide out there, the rear on the Porsche gets really unsettled. So I actually brought it back in, and it definitely did make it a faster over the lap. It's really strange, but in the race conditions it was more consistent to try and keep it as much as you could in the limits. You do run a little bit wide, but some drivers were running out to the wall sometimes, but that for me was not the fastest way in the Porsche. It just unsettled the rear too much, and also it's very risky that you could pick up a penalty. As we now are going to have a little look on the inside to the Mustang, but we can't, just a bit too far back there, so I decided to not make any risky moves at this phase of the race. The race is still 100% on. You can see P1, he's only a few seconds up the road, maybe 3.5 seconds up the road. So I've just got to try and be patient and wait for the opportunity to come. As we looking back on myself now, taking much faster lines with much better exit speeds. That Mustang, you're going to see a difference now. He goes too fast into that corner. I take a much wider entry and then get on the apex much better and on the power so much earlier. And this gives me a run on the inside now. So we're going to get side by side going into the final corners. And this is an overtaking opportunity now. I decided to brake late and go for that. And I put myself up into P2. So with a nice overtake, nice driving from the Mustang as well. He didn't shut the door. I think he just accepted that there was no point in fighting that one. His tyres were starting to feel probably much worse. I was actually on the medium tyres, which for me, again, like in the first race, was a better tyre for me to be on. I do prefer the softer compound tyres. I feel like I can make them last longer than the harder compounded. It's weird. Although the harder will last longer before giving up complete grip, I feel like there's enough grip on the mediums before they start losing too much pace. So that's why I tend to always go with the softer tyre as much as possible as we're going into turn 2. And you can see that P1 is just about 3.5 seconds ahead. However, now's the phase where I've just got to try and hold on. I didn't want to attack too much before the pits, because the tyres obviously took that big spin around about this point on the track when we were on lap 1 and took a lot of wear out of them. So for these next laps I need to be really patient, drive it smooth, try not to take too much life out of them, and just try and keep the gap fairly static to P1. We might, if I gained a bit, I gained a bit, but I didn't want to start taking massive chunks out and risk a massive slide and lose a lot of time in the process. So it's just about patience now at this phase of the race, and then when we put the new tyres on, that's when we're going to try and attack and see if we can close down that slipstream. As you can see, the P1 driver who was in the FIA Monaco live event is driving really well. He's keeping it nice and smooth. I think he went for a different method on the tyres. I think he might have put hard tyres on, which was actually a little bit better than I expected. I did do it when we were with Oscar Legner, and we actually drove okay laps. It was a little bit more consistent for lap 5 and 6, but I felt the overall pace was better on the medium, and that's why I decided to go on mediums. A lot of people did still choose the hards on the Porsche because they were still quite good tyres. It's just I just prefer the little bit of extra grip on acceleration that the softer compound gives, and it was definitely gaining me time. You can see now going up the hill, we've managed to drop P3 from this race fairly quickly. You can see there's quite a big gap as we're actually, I think we're going past a lapped car there, going into turn 2, and now trying to just concentrate on hooking these corners up, getting on the power without putting too much power, obviously without getting any wheel spin. It's also important, out of turn 2, not to spin them rear wheels up too much, because when you do that, you just take so much life out of these tyres. But definitely starting to gain a little bit on P1. You can see the gap is coming down, even though we're not pushing 100%. We're keeping smooth, and that was the aim. Just keep it smooth, keep it consistent, and then when we come out the pits, we're going to have them fresh mediums, and then we can start putting in some better lap times and seeing if we can gain some time on P1, as I think this is now the in lap for the pit stops. And we're going to obviously try and attack. I wanted to attack the pit entry because there is a possibility to gain some time when you're driving in the pits at the Redbull Ring. If you get the line perfect, you avoid getting a penalty, and you can gain a good half a second. You can see there getting half sideways as we go into the pit lane, really using all the track as we go in, again very close to the wall. You can see the difference on the entry compared to the EU race, where I wasn't really needing to push. I was completely on it at that phase. Now I'm really trying to gain some time in the pit stop phase. So some new tyres, and now is the time where, again, I did a similar trick as I did in the EU race, put it into first gear on the shifter, and you can see we actually gained over half a second to P1 through the pit stop phase. So I think a couple of attempts of that might have been the entry, and I think a couple of attempts would have been the little trick I did with the shifter, where I put it into first gear automatically with the shifter, and it just stops it. It just stops you having to guess when to change into second gear, which is much better in my view. As you can see there, P3 now in that Beetle hasn't pitted yet. He did actually have a little look up the inside there. I was a little bit worried that he might go for that, which would have been a very, very silly move. On worn tyres, it would have made no sense for him to go for that move. So luckily he didn't go for that. He stayed behind, and I think he realised he just wouldn't have had the grip to make any sort of move there. As now this is the phase now where we're going to have to really charge and catch up to P1, and we've got to pass him. Catching is one thing, passing is another thing. A lot of famous people have said this in the past. It's the same on GT Sport, especially when you're in the same car. Luckily, obviously at the Redbull Ring, you do have that straight going into turn 2 where there's a possibility of an overtake. I think also if you're going to go back and watch the live stream, if you didn't catch it when it was live or have caught up with it since, you're going to see how concentrating I was at this phase. I was really trying to get in the zone. I was trying not to read the chat. I was still noticing the odd bit of chat coming up, but I was really trying to concentrate, making sure I was hitting the corners, making sure I wasn't taking wear out these tyres, because I knew that when it was looking like it was going to come down to either 2 laps to go, 1 lap to go, when the overtake was going to be on, because of the way I could see I was just gaining that little bit every lap. And so one thing I didn't want to do was wear the tyres out, slide it around, spinning it up too much in these early laps. So trying to keep it nice and smooth while being aggressive as well, just so that if we do get close enough, that we've got enough tyre life left on these medium compound tyres to make some sort of a move. But you can see how much we're gaining with these fresh medium tyres compared to P1, who again opted for the harder compound tyre. I think it was a strategy mistake. Where some people do prefer going on them tyres because they don't like them when they wear out the mediums. It just depends how well you can cope with tyre wear. I tend to be able to cope better with the softer compound tyre wear than I can when they're hard. It's really strange, whether it's the driving style or the way you're getting on throttles compared to other people, because everyone has different throttle inputs compared to everyone else. So it's really interesting to see that some people still prefer going on the harder tyres. You can see how much time we're gaining. Through the corners is where we're really gaining the time, through these corners. Obviously the Redbull Ring isn't a track that's going to gain you massive amounts from the compound change, but what it is, it's through them corners there, the really fast flowing corners. That's where the bite of the front end really helps you. In these 2 final corners, this is where I was getting the advantage of that extra grip, as we're getting very close now. We're getting very close to picking up the slipstream. So the only problem now we're going to have is the dirty air, which we all know exists in GT Sport. I've explained it tells you in the options. A lot of drivers experience it, and you do feel it. You feel the front end not as much grip. You feel the rear starting to go a little bit loose, and everything doesn't feel quite as solid as it did before when you were in this, obviously not in the dirty air. But you can see getting closer and closer to this slipstream now. We're probably actually just in the slipstream at this phase, pretty much as close as you're going to get. I think we're around 1 second away, just picking up the back end of that slipstream. So now you can see he's actually going to try and break that slipstream slightly, moving over to the right hand side. So we must have been just about 9 tenths to 1 second behind him at this phase, and just trying to keep the pressure on. He's definitely feeling the pressure in this race at this phase of the race. He must have been feeling quite nervous, because I've obviously caught up fairly quickly and now we've only got a few laps to go in this FIA race to see who's going to take the win from this race. You can see how it's quickly became just a 2-car race as well. I think P3 was quite a way back, more than 5 seconds or so. So it is definitely just a battle for the lead now between myself and the Brazilian driver in P1, as we're trying to get on the power as early as we can, coming out of some of these corners and trying to get as close as we can. This was the hardest part of this now, was breaking that slipstream from about 9 tenths to 6 tenths, where obviously you're getting the dirty air, because once you're in that dirty air, it is a little bit more difficult to get to that half a second margin. Once you're in half a second, the slipstream really does pull you in on GT Sport. So that's what I was trying to do without. So I was trying not to make mistakes, keep it smooth, and hoping that the opportunity would come for an overtake, as we have a massive moment on the rear there. You can see the rear went a little bit loose coming out of turn 1. I had to correct it, but we're still luckily in that slipstream and working our way into turn 2 now, the really heavy braking zone. And you can see just not really close enough to make any sort of move there. So trying to get back in that slipstream and get as close as we can. We need to be within really 4 or 5 tenths before the long straights to make any sort of gains down them, so we can actually make a move. You can see getting closer and closer. This was so intense, I have to say. Like I keep saying, you need to go, if you want to, we'll go back and watch this race live, and you will probably see the intensity in my driving. I was just 100% focused, concentrating, trying to make sure I hook up the lines. You can see my drive, I was actually driving really well, using the full width of the track, using every bit of track that I could. You could see using the full length, kicking the car out to the right hand side into left hand corners, using every inch that I could, and really getting on the power as early as I could, and really working this Porsche as much out of these mediums now as I could, because I need to make this move as we're coming into the penultimate lap now. Just 2 laps to go after we finish this lap, and we've got to make the move at some point in this race to get the win out of this race on the America's servers. So you can see now coming through to the penultimate lap, are we close enough this phase to make a move into turn 2? Are we going to be able to pick up the slipstream? We're definitely a lot closer than the previous lap as we go through turn 1, clipping that apex nicely there, not running too far wide, using a little bit of the red tarmac on the left hand side, as the Porsche in front of us does the exact same thing as well. And we're actually picking up quite a big slipstream now. You can see we're getting closer and closer and closer, but again we're just not close enough to really to make a move. So I decided there was no point going for a lunge, let's just keep it nice and smooth, as P1 has a massive moment on the exit there, which gives me a run now to have a little look up the inside. He goes defensive there, so I'm going to go over to the other side of the track and just to have a little move around, see if we can scare him into missing his braking point. But he keeps it nice and calm, hits his braking point. So I decided there's no point in losing time. What I need to do now is just stick to this slipstream, because if I can stay this close going into that long straight, there's going to be an overtaking opportunity. So you're going to see just trying to stay nice and smooth, keep it as calm as possible while being aggressive, as again P1 is really looking a little bit ragged. It looks like he was getting a little bit nervous and losing a bit. He's losing the rear end coming out some of the corners. You can see I look a lot smoother at this phase of the race. I'm a little bit more in control. I think the medium tyres were probably the better tyres, especially on the second stint when you've got the lighter fuel and not as much life has come out of these tyres. As again going through the final corners, he's running really wide and risking picking up a penalty as we go through the final corner now to start the final lap in this very intense race for P1. As we're going to get the slipstream, we actually decide to go and fake a move down and go to the left hand side. He falls for it, goes defensive into turn 1, and now I'm going to be able to get the cut back. You can see a much better line through the corner. We go up the inside and we've actually got ourselves into P1. So now we have to hold on to this P1 position all the way to the finishing line. So it's just about going defensive over to the right hand side of the track. You can see I make sure that he can't make that move, and then I move over to the left hand side to try and squeeze him to that left hand side and make sure I get a nice solid exit from this corner. I hooked it up really nicely there. He tried to get on the power far too early and actually lost control of the rear of the car and just couldn't get the power down, and that's given me a nice bit of breathing space now going into the right hand corner now that we're approaching, and he's just not able to get close up. You can see he's obviously driving as aggressively as he can. You can see using all the track. I'm trying to get back in my slipstream, but I felt fairly comfortable at this stage. I didn't want to make a mistake obviously, but I actually felt like there's no way he was going to get past me at this phase as long as I keep it on the track and drive smoothly. So you can see not really driving as aggressively as I was when I was behind him. I'm just trying to make sure I hook these corners up and keep the car on the track and just get to the finishing line in P1, because this will be one of my best races, I think. after that stupid mistake I made at the start of the race, which was my fault. I think I drove really well to get myself back into the lead of this race and possible maximum points. As you can see, again, going through the final corners, P2 running really wide. Now he's got that dirty A, nearly loses it on the final corner, and we're going to take the checkered flag and the win in that very intense race. I think you'll agree that was a really enjoyable race to watch. I thoroughly enjoyed watching it back on the replay as well. It was really entertaining to watch that battle. I did want to send P2 a message to say a great race, but he did decide to leave the lobby pronto after the end of the race. So a bit annoyed. I wanted to say thank you because I really enjoyed the battle, but he was obviously a little bit disappointed at losing that race. As we're going to watch the highlights, this was going into turn 1. You're going to see now P1 gets on this curb on the right hand side, puts the panel, loses the rear, and without me being there, I think he would have lost that rear and spun it 360. So he actually gained out of that, and I actually lost. Now this was myself, very silly drive, and you're going to see what I tried to do was I tried to go underneath around the back of the Mustang and then outbrake him on the inside going into the right hand corner up ahead, but I didn't see that Porsche getting the slipstream. You can see I thought I had enough, I just thought I had space. I didn't see him coming up the inside, and I did whack him, and I think he picked up the penalty for the connection then with the Mustang when he hit him on the inside. The game's obviously not understood that he was out of control, and massive apology to that guy because that was my fault. However, we then did some really good driving to come back. You can see this was the move on the Mustang where I set it up the few corners before, got my car side by side near enough, braked a little bit later, got it up on the inside and got myself into P2. And then we had the move on P1 that gave us the win in this race. This was probably one of the best moves I've done, to be fair, because if you watch, he didn't need to go defensive into this corner. I think he could have just stayed out the left-hand side. I would not have thrown it up from this far back, but he obviously thought I would have done. I faked the move down the right, forced him to go defensive. Then he had a compromised entry into this corner, and this just gave me a really nice clean line for the corner, able to get on the power that much earlier, and then the move was done all the way up the hill. And again, you're going to see he tried to obviously defend at the top, try and get back past up at the top of the hill, and you're going to see he nearly loses control of his car. Pretty much what he did on lap 1. Tries to get on the power far too early, and without a car there to stop him, he has to save it, and he this time loses a lot of time. So luckily for myself, got ourselves back into P1 and come away with a really impressive win. I was really happy with that. I hope you enjoyed them videos. I know I thoroughly enjoyed that second race. First race was a little bit of a boring race, I'm going to be brutally honest. That's why I just skipped most of it because there was no real action in that. But that second race on the America servers is the reason why I'm doing these American races, because it's more opportunity to get amazing footage like that and amazing races. And the fact that we streamed that, it was just really good. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I hope everyone who was in the stream enjoyed that race as well. Anyway, thanks for watching these videos. Make sure you hit that subscribe button if you've obviously enjoyed it and you're not already subscribed, and click that notification button so you don't miss any future uploads. And also, please make sure you give this video a thumbs up if you've enjoyed it. I do appreciate every single person that takes their time to click that button and just give it a thumbs up. Thanks again for watching, everyone.